Good morning. It's Wednesday, 7:15. Time for your APUSH lecture. The best part of your morning or your Wednesday probably. So first off, I hope you guys did well on your trig quiz. I thought about you all afternoon while I was on my day off, and I'm hoping everybody did okay and everybody survived and you got awesome grades like you always do, even though you stress. So that was first. Second, our AP practice exam is scheduled for this Sunday at 1 o'clock. So I really, really hope you guys appreciate the opportunity to practice this. I say 1 o'clock. You can get here from any time from 1 to 2. And I know some of you have things that you need to do, and I'm hoping some of you can get off work because I know when Sunday is a work day. But I think it's a really great opportunity for you to practice. You can stay as long as you want. You don't have to sit for the whole thing. But please think about this Sunday, 1 o'clock. I emailed your parents, so hopefully your parents will be supportive of you coming as well. So we'll talk about that. And then if you haven't looked on our homepage, I do have a quiz about where we're going to eat, right? Because we get finished with the exam like 12:15, 12:20 at the end of sea lunch. So obviously we don't eat lunch. So we have the opportunity, although this is a little weird because not everybody's open. Right now, I think the only places that are open for in-person dining are Joe's, Bob's, and La Pachanga. I put Dairy Queen on there in the hopes that May 1st turns a lot of things around. And then I also put a couple places on there if you want to order and have them deliver. So please pick. Majority rules. I'm always hesitant about Bob's because it's so expensive, but I think it's expensive for teenagers. But anyway, so please vote on that. Because we need to get permission, the field trip approved, because it is a field trip, and then permission slips and all that other good stuff. So now that I have wasted 2 minutes, we need to get back into our notes. So we were on and ended up on page 6 talking about the internment camps. And again, those show up a lot on the AP exam because if you don't and haven't been taught about them, that seems absolutely ridiculous that the United States would intern its own citizens. And it is essentially the idea of identity and being able to visually see the differences in immigrants from Asia and specifically Japan. Looney Tunes cartoons were horrifically racial in this time period about over accentuating features and facial features and putting Japanese caricatures into Looney Tunes cartoons. It's really bad. Anyway, so let's look on page 6. I'm actually going to read something. I don't often read right from the notes because I would hope that you would do that. But 1942 is a critical year for the survival of the Allied powers, right? The United States is attacked in 1941, December. So January 1942 begins, and it is a critical year. Japan controlled all of Southeast Asia and most of China. Germany controlled all of Western Europe, Northern Africa, and deep inside the Soviet Union. It is a perilous time. And at this point, Great Britain has been holding off Germany by itself, and no one is stopping Japan. And so we begin January 1942, at this perilous time for the whole world in aspect to these two countries that have no issues, no problems, killing people that don't fit into their scheme, taking over and taking over other countries, sovereign nations, and it looks very scary for the world as this continues to roar on. So this grand alliance, the coalition of the nations at war with the Axis power, created with the signing of the United Nations Declaration on January 1st, 1942. The objectives are fairly simple: Hitler first. And again, that's the mistake that Hitler makes in declaring war on the United States first, instead of allowing the Pacific theater to play out, because there are going to be people in the United States that will be very upset with that strategy. We weren't attacked by Germany. We were attacked by a nation. Granted, it was a territory of ours, and remember that it's not a state yet. But we were attacked, and it seems to many people that should have been where we started first. Churchill and FDR wanted to concentrate on defeating Germany before giving Japan higher priority. So these are the plans. Economic blockades on Germany and Italy. And that'll work for a bit, especially Italy, because Italy doesn't really have much of an economy to start with. And it will be difficult on Germany for a while, but because it controls so much of Europe, it has access to a lot of things. Air attacks on Germany. That will be the first real big dent, or the real big effect that this will have on Germany and its civilian population. Peripheral strikes in the Med, and final direct assault on Germany. And that will take 3 years. We won't be close to that for a while. From the very beginning in 1942, defeat after defeat after defeat after defeat. We are not successful. For the most part, the Americans land in Northern Africa. And that in itself proposes a lot of difficulty, right? It's a desert. Like, we haven't ever fought in a desert, and getting all that geared up. Sand is very difficult for moving parts, and especially moving engine parts. And so we're not geared up for that as well. So there's a lot of retooling that has to take place. In Asia, we don't have a navy, but we have to rebuild our whole navy. And Japan is taking advantage of that. And they take Guam, Wake Island, Hong Kong, Singapore, Burma, Dutch East Indies, Philippines. The Burma Road is cut to supply to China. On the top of page 7, the United States loses the Philippines. Now remember, we control the Philippines as a result of the Spanish-American War. So 20,000 troops led by General Douglas MacArthur is going to withdraw to Bataan, and that is, again, where we talked yesterday about that death march. But eventually they surrender. And again, like I was saying yesterday, rules of engagement say when you surrender, you should be treated in a certain way. And that's not going to happen with the Japanese, especially. And I left out the crucial part yesterday because I was in our notes today, and I wanted to make sure that you got the full effect of what this is going to happen. So the Bataan Death March is called a death march for a reason. 85-mile forced march of U.S. GIs who were tortured. And then when they get to the end of the march, those that survived, they were burned alive, because the Japanese didn't want to treat them as prisoners of war, meaning they had to have housing, they had to feed them, they had to provide medical care. So it becomes easier just to burn them. This becomes one of the most horrific atrocities in the Asian theater, and it will be sadly propagandized by the United States and others about the horror of what would happen to the world if Japan were able to control it. MacArthur ordered by Washington to leave for Australia, and his famous "I shall return." He didn't want to leave, but he was a very important general at this time period. Doolittle raid is militarily insignificant. So this is a raid of airplanes that flies into Japan, drops a couple bombs, and comes back home. It doesn't do anything other than morale. It gives this boost that we actually have the capability of doing that. And it, again, strategically and changing the way the war is going, it doesn't do anything. But it is very much sensationalized in the United States as this great morale booster, and we're getting back at those Japanese. Again, in Europe, early defeats. Germans are going to sink 8 million tons of Allied supplies, 20% of those going to the Soviet Union. Germans are going to push into Stalingrad and to El Alamein in Egypt, and that's where we'll take a big battle that turns the tide. So remember, the significant part about studying war in AP history courses is how do we get into the war, turning points, and how do we get out? And then the other significant part is what's happening back in the United States. And in World War II for the United States, we have another thing happening, very much like what we talked about with the Japanese. We've got a lot of race issues that are going to rear its head in the 1950s in the 1940s that we're going to have to deal with at the 50s and the 60s. So when we talk about the civil rights movements in the 1950s, it really starts in World War II, where once again we have segregated troops. We're asking men to go defeat enemies, and they are not treated as citizens in their own country or provided all the same rights and privileges. So, turning points: the Battle of Stalingrad, perhaps the most important battle in the whole world. Not the whole world, in the whole war. It is for the purpose that this is the first time that the German army will be defeated on land. So this Battle of Stalingrad, again, the German army after Stalingrad, always in retreat. Stalin never forgave the Allies for not opening a second front, and that's going to be a big problem when we get to the peace treaties. Stalin is not happy. It also doesn't help that Stalin is crazy. Crazy. In Northern Africa, we have Operation Torch led by General Eisenhower. At this point, he is not the commander of all Allied forces. He is general in our in our army. And in November 1942, this is where he begins his ascent at the Battle of El Alamein. The British have been fighting German panzer divisions since 1941 with really no success. The Germans are led by General Rommel, who is known as the Desert Fox, and the British have not even come close to any kind of victory or making any kind of inroads into pushing the Germans back or keeping them from gaining more territory. The Battle of El Alamein in October and November signaled the end of German presence in northern Africa, and the British forces will push Rommel out. Again, considered one of the major turning points in the history of the war. Operation Torch, 100,000 Allied troops invaded northern Africa, and German armies, again, will be moving back. And for the most part, they move across the Med, the sea, into Sicily, and into Italy. On page 8, eventually, everyone knows, Germany knows, Great Britain knows, United States knows that the Allies have to make a landing on the continent of Europe. How, where, when, again, all up in the air and being major decisions. Amphibious landings are difficult. They are so hard, and there is always a very large loss of life in these invasions because it is an operation that requires coordination on two events, right? One, you actually have to get people there. So that has to coordinate with some kind of navy, some kind of water movement of troops. So you got to get those troops on those water crafts, and then you've got to get them to the beach. Once they get on the beach, then you've got to also provide supplies for them to move off that beach. You've got to supply them with armament. You have to supply them with artillery to support whenever they move off. It is a vast undertaking. And those of you that have watched all the movies and seen everything, even the movies in their best historical content cannot even come close to describing how difficult this is. So the first place that we're going to invade that gets very little traction in my favorite history buff peoples and history movies is the invasion of Italy. Number one, because it takes forever. Italy bogs down Allied troops, and it bogs down Italy. It bogs down Mussolini, and it is important in that bogging down because at some point Hitler is going to have to take some of his troops off his Western Front and provide them to Mussolini, because if the Americans take Italy, then Hitler is in a bad place. So we're thankful for Mussolini and his ineptness at being a military commander, because we certainly needed Hitler to take his eye away from that western coast so that we can be better prepared and not meet the full brunt of the German army during our invasion. So July 1943, British and U.S. forces land on Sicily. We get Sicily easily, right? It's an island. It's not hard. One of the most horrible things that make me like so angry in reading books, and I had to stop reading this book for a while because I'm like, these people are so dumb. About a book I was reading about the invasion of Italy, is that it would have been very easily, because it's an island, for the Allied forces to surround the island and not let the German forces off. But guess what? They don't do that. And all the German forces slip off of the island of Sicily and boop, drop into Italy. And I think I messed that up. They dropped off the island of Sicily, move a little across this little teeny patch of water, and then set up in Italy, which makes it again difficult. And it's so angry when I read that. Even me, General Norris, knows surround the island first so they can't get off. Anyway, sorry. Mussolini will be forced out of power by officials within the fascist party. And again, the reason why this doesn't get much play is June 4th, 1944, kind of around the same time as that D-Day thing is going on, the Allies march into Rome. It takes them, though, from July 1943 to June of 1944 to get there. And it's not far. It's just a horribly planned invasion by the United States. It's one book that I read. Obviously, I love history books, but I had to put that book down so many times because I could not understand how stupid they were in planning this invasion. It drove me nuts. U.S. military leaders frustrated with the focus on Italy in 1943 as it had little strategic value, and it really doesn't. It sends some of those troops that could have gone to the Western Front into Italy, but it doesn't really hold a lot of battle. Mussolini at this point is an afterthought. D-Day, June 6, 1944, is the invasion of Normandy. It's Operation Overlord. If you're asked anything about this, which I can't even imagine, it will always be referred to as Operation Overlord, just to not give you any additional information. The world's most important battle, commanded by General Dwight D. Eisenhower. At this time, he is the Allied Supreme Commander, so he is in charge of all the forces, Allied forces, British, French, United States. He's the top guy. The troops are going to leave England, stormed 5 beaches, 80,000 more men within 3 weeks, 3 million. Again, demonstrated the significance of the Battle of Britain and holding on to that. Casualties during D-Day, there will be over 2,200 men will be killed. Over 1,600 were wounded. It opens a second front, which makes the Russians happy. By August 25th, the Allies are entering into Paris. By the end of the summer, Belgium, France, Luxembourg liberated. And again, this was a pivotal point in the battle for Europe and bringing about the end of Hitler. Invasion of Germany. Obviously, that's the place. The objective is to invade Germany, and the end point was Berlin, which was at that time the capital. The proceeding up to that is we're just going to bomb the heck out of every German city and hope that the German citizens can force Hitler to resign, step back, and that we don't have to do this invasion. And it doesn't work. The United States bombs the heck out of cities in and around Germany. It's eastern part of Germany. I'm sorry, the western part of Germany. What ends up happening is the last big battle. It's called the Battle of the Bulge, and it's called the Battle of the Bulge because when armies progress forward, I hate that I'm doing this without, I guess I could draw my board back there. When armies progress forward, here we go. They progress forward in a line, and they do that so that they keep their supply lines moving with the army, and you don't want any kind of fluctuation. Well, what happens in the Battle of the Bulge is the Germans are presenting their all-out last ditch. The United States is moving through the Ardennes forest thinking that they're just going to meet regular size battalions or units as they move through the forest. And what they don't know is they're about to meet the might of the final push of the entire German army. And so what happens as they move forward, this is the way they want to move, right? With everybody moving forward. What happens is the Germans bust through this line here and create this big, huge bulge. And it gets these men, which is why it's called the Battle of the Bulge, and gets men in December in a really cold part of the country that is getting ready to experience its coldest winter on record in like 50 years, stuck in and just this kind of stalemate. The bulge, and because of that bulge that way, can get supplies. So these are men really trapped. This is the Army, Easy Company, 1st Battalion, all stuck there. The only ways they can get in supplies is if planes drop them. Winter time in Germany is like a perpetual fog day. It's kind of hard to describe. It's very dark, fog all the time. So it's hard for planes to fly in that weather. And it's also hard to get them to drop the supplies in the right spot. They're very close together. The German army and the American army, they're very close within shouting range. And it's a very difficult time. It's their last-ditch effort. The 1st Battalion, never really happy with this. George Patton comes up to save the day. The 101st Airborne Division is there, and they are not ever very happy with Patton getting his tanks saving the day, because they don't really feel that way. But by January, within the month, Allies are moving forward. And then we start dropping these bombs with just a horrific amount of firepower. April 1945, the U.S. approaches Berlin. Soviets are coming from the east, and it is an all-out mad rush. Who's going to get to Berlin first? Hitler goes into his bunker and commits suicide with his wife, Eva Braun, on April 30th. And May 7th, Germany unconditionally surrenders on May 7th, 1945, which is VE Day, Victory in Europe. Unconditionally surrendering means we don't get to make any terms. We make no terms. We are surrendering to you whatever and however you want this war to end. So we'll stop there. We'll finish Japan tomorrow. And again, a couple of things to remember, those of you that have gotten to the end of this. Make sure you vote on where you want to eat. Make sure you think about making arrangements to come on Sunday at 1 o'clock to take the practice quiz. And again, you can stay for as long as you want. Do all parts of it. I break it up just like the test. So if all you want to do is do the multiple choice, or if you just want to do multiple choice short answer, or if you want to just look at everything and see all the timing, we're good to go. All right, so make sure you go and check your assignment for the day. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.